This was the assignment that you submitted as the poetry paragraph. Choosing a definition and writing a paragraph to support that definition, including a works cited and parenthetical citations in the paper. Your paper should look like this. It's set up in MLA format, which means I have a header with an inserted page number, the identifying information in the top left, the paragraph, which is indented, and then a works cited on a separate page. We're going to look a little bit more in detail at some of these elements, but I want you to look at this paragraph. In the first sentence, the topic sentence, the definition of poetry that is being used is introduced using the author's name. And then you will notice that there are poems that are introduced. Billy Collins' poem, Church Going, and about halfway down, Marge Piercy's poem, Barbie Doll. These are the poems that are used to support Robert Penn Warren's definition, which says that a poem is a light by which we see life. And then the concluding sentence returns to that idea presented in the topic sentence. Notice that the works cited is a separate page. It is an alphabetical listing of the sources that were cited or mentioned in the paper itself. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. But there are 2 or 3 things I'm going to point out. One is that some of you are still having space that is extra after your paragraphs. If you go any place in your paper and you click on a line and then you check paragraph formatting, you should find here in the spacing before and after both set to 0. And your line spacing should be double space. You may have it automatically indent the first line, but you can do that with a tab as well. Make sure that these things are set correctly. When you first start a paper, the automatic or default setting is to add space before and after the paragraph. So make sure you're making that correction. To set up a works cited on a separate page, first, you can go into Insert and you can tell it to insert a page break. You can do it either at the end of the text or you can do it at the beginning of the title works cited. Notice that works cited is centered. The citations are listed in alphabetical order by the first word in the entry. If there is no author, then the first word in the entry is the title. You were provided these citation formats for your paper, and you had to fill in some blanks. But notice that this is traditional. This is a work in an anthology. That means that these poems were printed in a larger text that is an anthology, a group of poems that have been selected and compiled for a particular use. Notice that the citations are set up a little differently. Again, as when we checked our paragraph formatting, we can check the paragraph formatting here. When I go to Paragraph, under Indentation and Special, I choose Hanging. It's still double spaced. There's still no extra space after the paragraph. And that's how I accomplish this particular kind of formatting. Now, I took that same paragraph and provided some annotations. You'll notice that there's a little bit of color coding here that hopefully will allow you to look more closely at the specific requirements. And I've also provided information about formatting here as well. One of the things I want you to notice is about incorporating source material. One of the things is that when you first introduce a text or a source, you should introduce it using the author's name and the name of the text. Think in terms of introducing a person. Who are they? What are they bringing to the table? Or why are they important for the discussion? In the first sentence, I introduced Robert Penn Warren, who has provided me with the definition. Notice that at the end of the sentence, but before the closing period, I provided the source of that quotation. If you'll look at Billy Collins' poem, Church Going, I introduce it with the author's name and the title of the poem, and I tell you the page numbers that it comes from. When I quote from the poem itself, when I use specific line numbers from the poem or specific lines in the poem, I cite the line number at the end of the sentence in which the reference occurs. Not immediately after the reference, but at the end of the sentence. Notice that I then introduce a second poem, provide the page numbers, and you notice that then when I go to the citation, I know what text that comes from. Again, when I introduce specific lines, I use line numbers in the citation. So, I've introduced a poem being defined as a light by which you see life, and notice that I repeat the word light. That is a strategy for coherence, the repetition of a key word. So I talk about the light in Collins' poem, the speaker shedding light, the light of Marge Piercy's poem Barbie Doll, and then I go back to light in my concluding sentence. That is only one strategy. You can also use sentence structure. You can use a technique called given and new, refer to something old, add something new, but show the relationship between the ideas. That is the idea behind coherence. Notice, too, that I use the speaker and I use the poem. Notice the parts in blue. The speaker considers. The speaker sheds light. The speaker reflects. Collins' poem ponders. Marge Piercy's poem questions. The poem focuses. The poem's light. It is wrong to assume that the author is the speaker or the narrator. That may be true, but that goes to another kind of understanding of the poem. Your understanding of the poem can be limited to the text of the poem itself. It may be that the author is the speaker, but you don't have to show that relationship in order to understand the poem. So use the speaker, the narrator, or the poem itself to speak to the issue. And that's what I tell you. Allow the poem to speak. That's what I mean by that. Notice then, in several of your papers, I told you to provide specific detail. Yes, Billy Collins' poem illustrates the idea that a poem is light by which we see life, but how does it do that? The same for Barbie Doll. So notice in green, those pieces of text are things that I have specifically quoted from the text. I don't have to use complete lines. I can incorporate it into my own grammatical structure, which is ideal, but I want to show how this specific poem illustrates or expresses my idea. So when the speaker considers the power of some sort of other that will go on while stopping by a country church, the reflections of the speaker shed light on the ways that human beings seek to understand the beliefs and rituals of both the present and the past. That line, those words came from line 32 in the poem. Notice that P is a small letter in brackets because it was capitalized in the original and I wanted it to be a part of a sentence. I included that so that it would be grammatically consistent with the sentence that I was writing. The speaker's reflections lead to the idea that there is a hunger to grow wise that is inherently human. Notice that I have ellipsis points showing that something has been omitted, and I tell you that it comes from lines 60 and 62. So I actually have quoted from two different lines in the poem, but I can show those two lines in one parenthetical citation at the end of the sentence. While Collins' poem ponders human relationship to belief, I'm giving you a transition, helping to establish relationship. Marge Piercy's poem Barbie Doll questions cultural expectations. I give you the source. The poem focuses on the challenges that young women face in a contemporary culture in which young women who are healthy and intelligent find themselves apologizing, advised to play coy, and look pretty. Again, I give you line numbers for those particular pieces of information that I borrowed from the text. I use quotation marks because it's exact words. The poem's light is a glaring one, back to Warren's definition, light, revealing a culture that sends mixed messages to its young women. For the girl child of the poem, I quote, "The attempt to meet the demands of such a culture comes at great personal cost." And I give you the line number from which I borrowed the text. Whatever a poem reveals, Warren's definition is a reminder of the value of the poem's light, one that allows the reader to see life, an observation that may mean a better understanding of the world, relationships, and oneself. I go back to the original definition. So I have a topic sentence. I've supported it with both general information and specific information from the poems. I am referencing the poem's text, not the author, and I return at the end to the definition that I chose. Over here to the side, notice the annotations. I remind you that light is a key word. I tell you that the first time a text is referenced, you should introduce it with both author and title. I tell you that when you cite a source, it comes at the end of the sentence and what is included in the citation. That we do not assume that the speaker or narrator is the author. That we use specific text to support our ideas. And that when we do cite specific text from a poem, we cite the line number. Finally, all paragraphs should have concluding sentences. They return to the main idea, and within a larger essay, they would also serve as a transition to the next idea. Again, with the formatting issues, use insert page break so that the work's cited as a separate page. The citations are double-spaced to get a hanging indent. You go into paragraph formatting, indentation, special, and hanging. Make sure you eliminate that extra space. Now back to our assignment. Make sure you read your instructions. Make sure you know what is expected of you. Third person was required. You were to have chosen a definition and illustrated or supported it. You were to have used literary present. I'm reminding you about documenting source material. The first time a source is mentioned, the author and title of the text should be mentioned. Think in terms of introducing the source. Anytime a source is used, a parenthetical citation, that parenthesis, is placed at the end of the sentence in which the reference occurs, whether you are summarizing, paraphrasing, or directly quoting. For all sources that are cited, you provide a full bibliographical citation on a Works Cited page, which is a separate page that is titled, arranged alphabetically, uses a hanging indent, and is double-spaced. Specific rules, you can go to the Hacker and Summers text, the tab MLA, or you can go to the OWL at Purdue. And the last reminder here is about paragraphing. A paragraph begins with a topic sentence that states the main idea. The support here were illustrations or examples that supported the idea of that definition. We assume that the reader is familiar with the text, but we still explain the relationships. Why choose this poem? What specifically in this poem supports the idea that we are presenting? Allow your reader to see or understand the point. Assume that they don't, explain it clearly. And then the concluding sentence returns to the idea of the topic sentence. You use the same basic structure in your literary analysis. Your topic sentence is one piece of support. Each topic sentence is one piece of support for the thesis. And then the paragraph is developed this same way. What is the main idea you are presenting? Use text to support your position, but you have to explain why you're using this text and how it relates to the idea that you are presenting. You can't simply drop a quotation in and expect your reader to understand it, nor can you simply reference a poem and expect your reader to understand the connection that you have made. So, the body paragraphs of the literary analysis use the literary text in a similar way. If you have questions about paragraphing, review the lectures from the first week. You'll find them in Rules, Review, and Grading Notes, a new tab in Blackboard. Make sure you complete an independent review. Check those errors in grammar and mechanics. I'm noticing fewer errors, so I'm assuming that some of you are learning from the experience. Understand the rule, why the error is marked, how to correct the error. If you don't know, ask. Review formatting errors. Are you having extra space? Are you naming your file something wrong? These are important to me, so they need to be important to you. It's a matter of following directions. If you don't understand how to correct it, ask. The penalties increase over time. Review the returned paper in the rubric. Do you understand what was expected? If you didn't have a work cited, there was a 20-point penalty. Do you understand how or why you didn't meet the expectation? Do you understand how to make corrections? If you don't, please ask. There are some rules I wanted to remind you about. Quotation marks. You use quotation marks for short titles like poems and story titles. You use italics or underline. Those are interchangeable, but be consistent. Do one or the other for journals, magazines, books, and plays. These are mistakes that some of you are making that I consider to be no excuse mistakes. A lot of rules of grammar are applied and mechanics are applied in a variety of ways, but these are fairly static. Do not use you. Use Control-F to search for it before you submit your paper. Initially, I marked the error. On this paper, there was a 5-point deduction for not using third person. On the next paper, there will be a 10-point deduction. Do not use you in academic writing. Do not use contractions in academic writing. It is going to be in some of the things that you read. However, you are not to use contractions. Again, use Control-F. Put an apostrophe in there. It will locate those so that you can eliminate them. Words are numerals. For words that can be expressed in 2 or fewer words, use words. For numbers that require 3 or more, you may use numerals. There are some exceptions, time, dates, page numbers, if you're referencing lines of poetry, but when you are talking in general, words and numerals in MLA formatting follow these specific rules. Rules are different depending on the style sheet that you use, which is what MLA is. These are the rules that you should understand and apply. Periods and commas always go inside closing quotation marks. There's no reason for you to have them outside. Note that when you have parenthetical citations, they follow the closing quotation mark, but they are before the closing period. Still, when the quotation mark and the comma or the period are there together, they go inside the closing quotation mark. Overall, you wrote very good papers. I really enjoyed reading them, and I enjoyed seeing the poems that you chose. But you do need to provide this extra detail using specific text to support your ideas. Think about how different this paragraph would have been if I simply said, Robert Penn Warren says a poem is a light by which we see life. And I told you that Billy Collins' poem, Church Going, is an example of that. That it allows us to see how human beings seek to understand beliefs and ritual. And that Marge Percy's poem, Barbital, questions cultural expectations. That it addresses the challenges young women meet in contemporary culture. you still may understand, but you don't have nearly as clear a picture. So think in terms of helping your readers see the relationships and to see what you understand. You have to put it down on paper for your reader to share it. And that's part of what we're doing. And then there are certain standards and expectations. We let the reader know where we got the information that we borrowed. And we use certain formatting standards because it makes life easier for everyone. We know what's expected and we know where to find it. If you have questions about any of this, please do not hesitate to ask.